Good evening. Welcome to the Friday webinars at Wharton Arts, featuring artists of different disciplines making authentic connections between art and life through the sharing of stories, expertise, and creations. My name is Helen Cha-Pyo, Artistic Director of Wharton Institute for the Performing Arts, and the curator and the host of the Friday webinar series. Wharton Institute for the Performing Arts comprises the New Jersey Youth Symphony, Patterson Music Project, and the Performing Arts School as New Jersey's largest nonprofit performing arts education organization, serving over 1,200 students of all ages and abilities through a range of classes and ensembles. Tonight, we have an exciting opportunity to speak with the creators of an original opera, This Little Light of Mine, story of how Fannie Lou Hamer risked her life to claim her right to vote. Commissioned by the Santa Fe Opera, words by Diana Solomon Glover, and music by Chandler Carter. During the second half of tonight's program, we will watch a 30-minute excerpt from the opera, Is This America?, which was performed and filmed live on the Portside's flagship in Red Hook, Brooklyn earlier this month, and screened just last week at the Center for Contemporary Arts. This performance that you will see was directed by Beth Grimberg and conducted by Jerry Lynn Johnson. So let me now introduce to you our 5 distinguished panelists tonight. Diana Solomon Glover, librettist, Chandler Carter, the composer, Beth Grimberg, the director, Jerry Lynn Johnson, conductor, Andrea Feinberg, the Director of Community Engagement at Santa Fe Opera. Welcome, everybody. And I will be just adding all of the spotlights to everyone. So give me a few seconds here. We are so thrilled to have all of you here. What a treat it is. At Wharton Arts, we have lots of students ages from 3rd grade all the way to 12th graders. And so we have a lot of us here in the webinar, but also folks who are watching on Facebook Live as well as YouTube Live. You have a chance, especially the participants of the webinar, to ask questions at the end of this session. So as you're listening, jot down your questions and we will get to you as soon as we can. Well, we are so thrilled to talk to the actual creators of a brand new opera. And, you know, there's so many questions that we can ask, but I want to start with Diana. Diana, you know, you are the one who wrote the words to this opera. And so maybe it would be really important for our listeners to know who Fannie Lou Hamer was and the importance of her work as a voting rights activist in the 60s, right here in America, and why is her story so important?
Thank you, Helen. First of all, I want to say on behalf of everyone, a big thank you to you and the Wharton Institute for the Performing Arts. We are all so inspired and encouraged by the efforts of our arts organizations during this pandemic to keep our industry alive and to make sure that artists of every age and discipline are able to keep expressing what makes us human and what gives us meaning. So we are very honored to be with you tonight and have this chance to engage with the Wharton community. I'm going to give you a little bit of background about Fannie Lou Hamer. And as Helen told you, I am the librettist half of the team that created the opera, This Little Light of Mine. Chan is the composer. And as she also said, we were commissioned by the Santa Fe Opera and its initiative, Opera for All Voices, to write this piece that illuminates the contribution of the great American hero, Fannie Lou Hamer. Now, some of you may know who she is, and then others of you are saying, I have no idea, never heard of her. But if you've ever heard the expression, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, you know Fannie Lou Hamer. She was born in 1917 in the Mississippi Delta, which was one of the richest cotton growing areas in the nation before the Civil War. She was the youngest of 20 children, 20. She was born into a family of sharecroppers. Now, sharecropping is just slavery by a different name, because it was a system of farming that held Black and white workers in perpetual debt to the landowner. They always owed more than they made. They could never break even. They never had enough to eat. They barely had clothes to wear. Their children only went to school for 4 months out of the year because they had to work in the fields the rest of the time. And even so, they were so poor generally that kids were taken out of school because they had to work more hours just to feed themselves. And there was almost no medical care. Black people, especially women, were afraid of doctors because women would go to the doctor for a problem that had nothing at all to do with reproduction and come out sterilized. It happened so often that it was referred to as a Mississippi appendectomy. And that's exactly what happened to Fannie Lou Hamer. She was sterilized without her knowledge, and she only found out because people were gossiping about it. In August 1962, she attended a meeting about voting. Can you imagine that she was almost 45 years old before she found out that Black Mississippians had a right to vote? But from that moment on, she began fighting for that right, organizing and leading voter registration drives and workshops, and she even put her body in harm's way. She was threatened and shot at and run out of town, but when that didn't stop her, she was jailed and beaten so badly that she never fully recovered from it. But you know what? Instead of that beating making her back down, it became her calling card. It became her credentials. And 2 years later, she led an integrated delegation called the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party to the Democratic National Convention in Atlantic City. And they demanded that their party be seated instead of the lily white delegation that Mississippi routinely sent. They protested day and night right outside the convention hall until the Credentials Committee had no choice but to listen to them. Now, there were many important people who spoke. Dr. King was one of them, but no one carried the moral authority of Fannie Lou Hamer, the street cred, because of what she had endured. Sadly, the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party was not seated in 1964, but Mrs. Hamer's testimony went into every American living room that had a TV. And she told them exactly what life was like in Mississippi for Black people. And the nation was horrified. Her testimony helped pass the Voting Rights Act, which outlawed the discriminatory voting practices that had been adopted by many Southern states after the Civil War, practices that had the effect of keeping Black people from exercising their right to vote. And you may have heard that the Voting Rights Act is under attack today. And many states have gone back to adopting laws that make it harder for people to vote. So the struggle continues. Now that's the background on Fannie Lou Hamer. And Chan will tell you why we chose to write an opera about her.
Yes. So Chandler, the composer, I think you're muted right now. So from what I understand, the idea of writing an opera about Fannie Lou Hamer came from you. So maybe you can tell us about the genesis of this whole project.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you, Diana, for that wonderful introduction. Fannie Lou Hamer, I first heard of Fannie Lou Hamer about 30 years ago watching a television documentary on PBS called Eyes on the Prize. And the episode that focused on Fannie Lou Hamer and Freedom Summer and the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. But her voice, particularly her words, "Is This America?" which is the name of this version of the opera that we presented at Red Hook a couple of weeks ago. Is this America? Her question was so compelling and attention-grabbing. It grabbed the attention of the nation, and not least of all because of who it was coming from. her voice is so immediately authentic. It's unmistakable. That day, as Diana said, Dr. King spoke. Other very prominent leaders, the head of the the NAACP. But it was Fannie Lou Hamer, a woman who had virtually little or no education, that 2 years before had just been a sharecropper. Here she was thrust in the national spotlight, and she stole the show. She upstaged everyone because of the authenticity of her voice. And that grabbed me, and it stuck in my head for decades. I would work in the 90s, as you know, would have worked with me and Diana. I've always been drawn to stories of social justice. I wrote an opera about the life of Nelson Mandela, but that was when I first learned of Fannie Lou Hamer, and I said, that is a character, an American, who I really feel I know. I can't say I understand or can fully appreciate what she went through. I could never possibly fully appreciate what she endured. But she is a woman of color who worked for her community, worked tirelessly for her family, her community. I recognize women like that. I knew them as a child. And I saw in Fannie Lou Hamer, I saw a lot of women that I knew. And I had been inspired by them, and I was immediately inspired by Fannie Lou Hamer and her courage. So I stuck in the back of my head and stayed there for a long time until I saw an opportunity that there was a commission, an advertisement for ideas about opera for all voices, for voices that you don't usually see on an operatic stage. And every word I read about the description, Fannie Lou Hamer's voice came to a woman of color, a woman, a person who fights for social justice. And I thought, now is the time. So, as I've said, the first person that came to my mind was Fannie Lou Hamer. The second person that came to my mind was Diana Solomon Glover, because I knew she would be the person who could write her story, could find words for Fannie Lou Hamer. So I think it was an email that was almost immediately responded to in the affirmative. And so the project was on its way within 2 minutes. The project, the genesis of this opera was born, and it was fertilized and off and growing. So now we have the fruition. So that's the genesis story.
Well, that's really great, and I know that Chandler and Diana, you have worked together before, so you kind of know each other, which probably helped to connect and give birth to this much easier than had you, looked for somebody to be the librettist. That's wonderful. And so, the artists, we are constantly looking for an opportunity to create something new. And, we are always so grateful for different foundations and different projects that kind of prompts us. And it sounds definitely like Santa Fe Opera was the one for you, Chandler. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Andrea. If you could just tell us more about the Santa Fe's Opera for All Voices. I love the name and, that commissioning program. And, as Chandler said, without such initiative, he may not have thought to write an opera like this.
Well, if we deserve very little credit. I mean, this really is all to Chan and Diana and ultimately Fannie Lou Hamer. But thank you. Opera for All Voices grew out of what I call a series of covert operation meetings alongside Opera America conferences with other opera companies and people who ran departments like mine, community engagement or education, and feeling that we were not putting out the best work in service to exciting a new audience or a younger audience, or like I often say, the opera curious, and bringing them to an understanding and appreciation of an art form that we so deeply value. And so 6 other opera companies joined the Santa Fe Opera in building a consortium that we eventually called Opera for All Voices. And it has a tagline, which is Stories of Our Time. And so we worked together to commission 2 teams to launch the initiative, and then we put out an invitational. And yes, Chan accurately described that among the things we were looking for were stories about that had some element of social justice, stories about women and women empowered women rather than women at peril, which many operas sadly represent. This, so 56 librettist composer teams applied to this project. And so out of 56, 2 were selected, and this is one of the 2. And it so beautifully represents what our intentions were. And so just one other thing, if I may, Helen, is that I thank you for appreciating what we came to name the initiative, Opera for All Voices. We think of that as being three domains. It's whose stories are we telling, to whom are we telling them, meaning who's in the audience, and who's telling those stories as well. So we're looking for diversification in all 3 of those domains.
Yeah, that's, I think opera is the medium that can best tell a story. I mean, the symphony can have a whole story behind it, but when you can choose actual words and, the words of those characters directly, I think the impact is so different, right? So I think the medium in which that, we can tell her story is just very powerful. Thank you. Thank you for all the work that you're doing. And I'm so looking forward to other projects going to be coming out of your commissioning project.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, I am obviously thinking as a youth orchestra conductor and artistic director of an education organization, constantly trying to connect with our young people, thinking, not everyone says, oh, this weekend I'm going to go and see an opera. We hope that that's going to be the culture going forward, because so much is available on YouTube, and you don't even have to leave your house right now to even see it. But I think that our curiosity goes to, okay, so somebody writes all this, and how does it get staged? How do you get the singers, and how do you get to enjoy it as a performance? And so I'm going to turn over to, the performing aspect of all this and bringing it off of the page. So I'm going to turn to Beth. Beth, you are the director of the opera, and especially the one that we're going to be seeing, the 30-minute the workshop version of this. And I know when you and I, and when we kind of had a pre-discussion about this, you are so passionate about this topic, about Fannie's story. And just having that connection with the real life story and bringing it to the art form and connecting life and art. And so I just wonder if you would share kind of your passion, as you were directing this about the opera, but also kind of your role as the director. What does a director do, and how do you see your role in bringing this to life?
Thank you, Helen. Yes, and thank you at Wharton for establishing this and sponsoring this. Yeah, I first got involved with the project about a year ago, and we sat down, we did what we call a libretto read. We just read through the entire text that Diana had written with some singers and actors, just to see how it felt, and that was my first introduction. And then we went away, and then of course the pandemic happened, and this summer I was thinking about it. And I realized, my gosh, what an opportunity right now in America because of the state of our nation and the polarization. And we have to get people out to vote. And what better, stronger voice than to hear Fannie Lou Hamer's testimony again. And she was exemplary in terms of setting a tone for activism, in terms of just knowing how to do something intuitively, again, without education, without anything more than a fourth grade level of education. She was inspired and felt this as her calling, and I felt the inspiration of her story. And as Diana talks about it in the libretto, and other people have said, she inspired other people along with her to work and to fight injustice and to fight for democracy and the right to vote. So I felt like what better time than now to get her story out there and to get her words and Chan's beautiful music out there, and that we had an audience. And the question was, well, how do we do this in the midst of a pandemic? Because we have been literally cut off at the knees in the performing arts field, especially as singers, where singers can't go into a room together and do what they love the most, which is to sing together. So I thought about, well, how can we safely perform this piece and get it out? And I had worked on a project, I had directed an opera on the ship, the Mary A. Welland, sponsored by Portside. We did a version of Il Tabaro in 2007. And there's something about the combination of music and water and being on the water that is wonderfully powerful. Plus, I was looking for an open air space in New York City that could be permitted. And so I got in touch with the woman who runs the boat, Carlina Salguero, and we talked about how we can do the performance there and do it socially distanced. And then the other thing that I requested, which is a very, very big ask for singers, that even though we're outdoors, I required everyone to wear masks while they were singing. And I started working in May with a wonderful costume designer in Boston. Her name is Brooke Stanton. And I called her up one day and I said, well, can you build some performance masks? And she went right to the task and got some singers and did some samples, and we had them. And so singers did that. So we did everything we could think of to keep the event safe, but all in the effort to get Mrs. Hamer's words out there. Something I like to say is very often we go to the opera to hear a love story. Well, this is Fannie Lou Hamer's affair with democracy. And I felt like her passion, her obsession with getting people's rights and fairness in this country, that nothing would stop us from telling her story, even a pandemic. So that's what we did. And we cast local, which everyone has to do these days. We found singers in the area. We found Jerry, our wonderful conductor, who lives not far in Philadelphia. And she came up and joined us, and we rehearsed virtually, except for the day of the show. We had a 2-hour rehearsal on the ship. And then we did 2 performances of it live. And now we have this beautiful film. We were also very lucky to have a very talented filmmaker named J-Tel Provence, who filmed it with an assistant, and just as you'll see, did a beautiful job in supporting the storytelling of this. And that's what the power of opera is, to tell these stories and to tell them with singing. And singing is so extraordinary. I can't think of another art form that gets straight to the heart of someone's emotion, that just goes directly into someone's heart. And there's no more stronger messenger than the human voice to do that. So the combination of Diana's words, Chan's powerful music, and Mrs. Hamer's life, I just felt like this is a time we have to get this out there.
That's a powerful combination right there. I love what you said about, this is a love story, Mrs. Hamer's love affair with democracy. I think I'm going to remember that for a while.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for putting that out there. That's wonderful. So then you gather, all the necessary, including the masks. As a director, you have to really look out for all of the details and the big picture and small picture. And then finally, somebody needs to come and put it all together, with the musical aspect of it. And so there comes the conductor. And as a fellow conductor, I'm going to turn to Jerry Johnson. I know that when we encounter a brand new score hot off the computer, in this case, from a composer's desk to our music stand, there's a sense of, excitement, that we are about to encounter a piece of history, for the first time. And so I just want you to kind of share with us your feelings when you got this score, Chan's score, and kind of knowing what this was all about, this wonderful project, your initial feelings and how you kind of work through that, and delivering the composer's and the librettist's intention and the true story of Fannie Lou Hamer all together, through the singers. And conductors don't make any noise, right? We just have to get everybody else to do all that work. And so just tell us about that.
Sure. Again, I would like to add my thanks to everyone here on the panel for the invitation to speak as part of this series. Thank you, Helen, and nice to see everyone out there in the webinar. Thank you for joining us. Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. First, as Beth stated, we as musicians have been cut off at the knees. We cannot perform and do and enable and enact our special gifts. So it's been a very difficult time. And so when I got this email from Andrea, whom I had never met, and it just came out of the blue. Andrea's laughing, it just kind of came out of the blue. And I didn't really know all of the details. It was, we need a conductor. Here's the project. Are you interested? It's in 2 weeks. And I just said, sure. You know, it was just one of those things where it wasn't just that, you know, you're desperate to work your craft and to share your gift. I liked the challenge of the new music. I am a huge supporter and have always been a huge supporter of new music. I'm a composer a bit myself. And it's always been, I think, an important part of my development as an artist to take opportunities to learn something new that has never been done before. I think sometimes we as artists may be a little reticent about being the first person to perform a piece because there is no performance history. There is no recording to listen to. There is nothing to kind of lean on and use as a crutch to support that learning process. And so it is something that is incumbent upon all of the artists, me and the singers and Beth and everyone bringing a brand new production to life, to bring our own creativity to this process as well. And so that's one of the things that I really enjoy about new music. Of course, the subject matter of Fannie Lou Hamer was very compelling. I knew who Fannie Lou Hamer was. I didn't know all of her story, but I did know who she was. And again, like Beth and Diana and everyone involved in this project was just so inspired by her. And I think what Beth said was so beautiful about this being a love story between Fannie Lou Hamer and democracy. And what I think was so pertinent at this time was not just that, you know, given the political environment in which we find ourselves, with voter suppression making an unfortunate return on the political landscape, and people need to see a very real story. You know, you hear that phrase, oh, one person can make a difference, and there's a lot of cynicism around that. But Fannie Lou Hamer is a real example of one person making a difference. And what was so amazing was that, like Diana said, she didn't find out until she was 45 that she had the legal right to vote. And that kind of lit a fire in her. And that sense of personal agency, and her sharing that. And that's really what voting is. It's enacting your personal agency, your enfranchisement in this American democracy. And it's so critical. And so I think that was kind of this counterbalance to the cynicism and this voter suppression, that really the right to vote is very precious and every single vote matters. And to be able to tell that through music, I think, is an even more compelling way to share that message rather than being sort of didactic and kind of heavy-handed. I think we let the music do a lot of that work and work its way into people's hearts and mind.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, there's just so much that was unpacked by all of you. Thank you, Jerry. Yeah, I mean, I just want to kind of point out the fact that all of you played a very important role in this. And, you know, you can't do any of this alone. This is such kind of the interconnectedness of the art form that opera is, or any performance is. And for our young people, you know, there's a lot to unpack when they go to see an opera, or, you know, in the modern world, it might be a musical, you know, if we were to do it, singers, words, and instrumentalists, and the score and the librettist and the storyline and the whole impact of it. I just wonder if we can shift a little bit now that we are really understanding the importance of this opera and such project. Technically speaking, how do you bring all of this together? And I'm going to kind of circle back to Diana and Chandler, you know, at the very beginning of it, who sends whom what? You know, okay, so we have the story here. Do you work with the words first? Do you have a melody in mind, a structure of an opera in mind? You know, I'm just going to open up for a dialogue between Diana and Chandler, and to just share with us the process. It may not just be our young people who's curious about this. I think we are all curious about it, and everyone works differently. So just how did you do it?
Well, in our case, and this isn't, it's not necessarily true for every composer libretto team, but in our case, I think I started with sort of a vision of what I thought the piece should look like. Sort of, I don't know, I kind of saw it kind of cinematically. And so I started writing to that vision. And because we had the constraints of having 3 principals at the most, and making it that something that a younger chorus, in our case, not a children's chorus, but youth chorus, high schoolers, very young adults could perform. I came up with the conceit of having Fannie Lou Hamer's daughter narrate the story, and then things grew out of that. Fannie Lou Hamer's daughter in the larger opera is a metaphor for the disease of racism. So, I mean, she in real life was sick and died at a very young age. And in the opera, she represents the oppression, the homicidal nature of oppression. And then Fannie Lou Hamer is free to just be who she was in space and time. So that's how we started.
Yeah, I was the first place I looked is the Fannie Lou Hamer's voice, and we have it in 2 ways. One, that incredible speech she made before the Credentials Committee at the Democratic National Convention in August 1964. That's where she sort of thrust onto the national stage. And there's recording of that. And I have experimented with this in another opera I've worked on The Life of Bobby Kennedy. These contemporary characters that are nearly contemporary, that we have their voice on video. And of course, it's right there on YouTube for everybody to go listen to. And they're remarkably dramatic. Fannie Lou Hamer's speech was, first of all, they gave her 8 minutes. And she told her story. And I mean, that's, I thought to myself, this is like this is a rhetorical level of Cicero, to take in 8 minutes and grab a nation. And she did it. And so I went to her voice, her recorded voice. And that's part of the opera. I've incorporated that into the opera and then the other part of her voice is her singing voice. Fannie Lou Hamer, untrained, but a wonderful singer. And her singing, of course, she learned it in the church, as thousands upon thousands of Americans have learned there. And she made that a part of her message. And of course, we all know that protest songs are integral to the civil rights movement in America, but no one's more important in introducing that than Fannie Lou Hamer. And one of the most riveting episodes, which we tell in the opera, is when she went with 17 others on an dirty old school bus. Yellow school bus drove 26 miles into the county seat to try to register to vote, knowing full well they would probably be rejected, knowing full well that beyond being rejected, they would also be harassed and then fired from their jobs and have their lives threatened. And while they were surrounded and harassed by the police and surrounded by a hostile mob, Fannie Lou Hamer, by herself, starts to sing This Little Light of Mine. And then everyone else sings. And by the end of it, the bus is rocking and they've turned the tables on the people that are intimidating them. And literally encouraging everyone, giving them courage. And that's the stuff of opera, if there ever was, that someone's singing voice could have you stand up to injustice and oppression. So that's so once I latched onto that, it's just like, just tell the story, tell the story, find Fannie Lou Hamer's voice and just tell it as clearly as you can. Then that will be riveting, and that's what we've tried to. That's been our guidepost.
Yeah, just the fact that you have that first source, that's amazingly powerful, right? So will hear her voice, portrayed, but did you pick soprano, mezzo?
Well, Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer is a tenor. She, I mean, yeah, when I sing, when I listen to her stuff and sing along, it's right. I'm perfectly comfortable in my range. So Fannie Lou Hamer was an alto. There's no way any composer would have set her as anything but an alto. And in fact, I had to pitch it up because it's still, so I chose keys that were close to Fannie Lou Hamer. So you'll hear you'll hear Go Tell It on the Mountain. The altos have the melody, and it's buried down in the alto register because that's where Fannie Lou Hamer sang it. So yes, you'll get to hear her voice.
That's, and we're going to be all hearing kind of your, musical language as a composer as to how, you're doing that. So I know that as we listen, if there are some questions, I'm speaking to kind of our Wharton Arts students who are listening, the questions, might pop up. So jot it down because we're kind of coming to the time where we should really play the opera and listen. But I wonder if Beth and Jerry could maybe set the tone for us. What are we going to be watching? You were, so heavily involved in producing this workshop, recording live performance outdoors, masked. I mean, it just doesn't get more real than this. So if you could just kind of tell us what, prepare us, what part of the larger opera, This Little Light of Mine, and this section is called Is This America? Her very poignant question. So maybe just share with us so that we can really be attentive in watching and listening.
Yeah, I'll start. Yeah, again, when I thought about this project, and This Little Light of Mine is a full length, I think 75-minute, one act opera. And I thought, well, what could we reasonably accomplish given all of the constraints of the pandemic? And I approached Chan and Diana and Andrea about, well, what if we took a couple of scenes and just did what I'll call an abridged version of the opera and focused specifically on the events of her trying to go out and register to vote. And then, so we had 3 key scenes from the opera, which you'll see tonight. But then I asked Diana to do something very different than she had done before, and she was fantastic and game, is to take that character of Dorothy Jean, Fannie Lou's daughter, and sort of translate her to a contemporary situation in the Black Lives Matter movement. And so Diana just ran with it. So we created a completely different dialogue narrative around the 3 scenes of her life. And we shift back from a contemporary story of a contemporary narrator named Tanya, who is trying to convince a Generation Z person named Jasmine of the value of protest and activism. And so that became a complementary story to the scenes that you'll see tonight. And we felt like that would be really, really hitting home with the story in a very, very relevant way to our lives right now. Because we're in the pandemic, you'll see a socially distanced performance. So what we couldn't do is really stage it in the sense of people moving to each other and creating the drama in that way. So once the cast of 7 arrive at their places, they're basically there for the whole performance. But we worked a lot on characterization, on telling the story of what they can do within the confined space that they're in. Right now, as a director, when I work with singers right now, I'm working on Zoom, and I'm working more as a film director than ever before. So we're working because, we're seeing people within a little square of a camera and not on the big stage. So we're working with faces, with expression. And then, of course, they're masked also. They have very little playing area. So we did a lot of eyebrow work also. So everything, whatever we can do to engage singers to tell the story. But just one thing that's very important, especially for the members of Wharton, of young people, is the pandemic has brought us tremendous challenges, but it's also brought us tremendous opportunities to think of how resilient we can be and continue our lives and do what we have to do. And in the spirit of Fannie Lou's resiliency, I felt like, well, we could do something here. Yeah, we're constrained. It's not an opera production that you would normally see, but it is a production nonetheless, and I think very successful in getting the music and words out there, and that's what we focused on and stuff. And Jerry can talk more about the music and conducting it under very, very, very challenging circumstances, and she did beautifully as well as the cast. So,
thank you. Yeah, I think Beth said that very beautifully. Just from a technical standpoint, I will just give our young viewers a little more context. As Beth stated, we had a limited number of soloists here, and so what you'll see is there will be one singer in particular who will be playing multiple characters. And so to not be confused by that there are scenes, and so one person may be playing multiple roles in relationship to that scene. And so, again, a lot of the text is very important here, but musically, it was also an interesting challenge. The way that Chan wrote the score, there's a combination of what we call Sprechstimme, which is kind of speak singing. There's some straight speaking, and then there's also just straight singing. And so the singers are having to navigate using their voices in very different ways. So there's the challenge of the mask. There's the challenge technically of the different musical techniques that are required to bring the text and music to life. And then you have the ambient noise. We are on the Mary Wayland. There were active ferry boats going by. Most of them were very respectful. Some of them made a few announcements while we were singing. And so there's a lot of challenges there for us as performers, not just the challenge of bringing a new work to life, but the challenge of the environment, of the pandemic, of doing this outside. Full disclosure, you will see me with seasickness bands on because the boat was rocking a lot. And so you'll see one on my arm as I'm conducting. That's not my Apple Watch, that's a seasickness band. And I was so grateful that I packed those. That being said, the singers all had such great poise and presence and calmness to bring this to life.
That's just amazing, to think that all of that, you had to overcome in order to deliver this. I think the performance is going to be probably that much stronger. I've seen parts of it, so I don't want to give it away, but I'm going to give Andrea the final words before we start to watch this as to how you presented this. And this is just amazing. When I heard that this is what you guys are going to be doing, my first thought was, that's crazy. But crazy wonderful, right? As Beth said, yeah, we can definitely do a lot of things. So I know you worked with another organization, Center for Contemporary Arts, in co-presenting, but maybe just tell us kind of from the Santa Fe Opera, how did you decide to do it? And then maybe just tell us where this is going, after this.
Thank you, Helen. I would the partnership with the Center for Contemporary Arts it was great. There was a platform. They brought audience to the piece, which is very important to us. But really, it was Portside, New York, that really showed up for us. And Carlina Salguero, as Beth was saying, who did a lot of heavy lifting on permitting and making the space hospitable, and just a really fantastic partner. So I do want to give her a shout out. And and again, I hesitate for that. I mean, this Opera for All Voices started with the Santa Fe Opera, and we're committed to new opera, and we're a company known for innovation. So this is all in our institution's wheelhouse. But it's the other people on this screen that really made this happen. And and Michelle Can, who was the pianist, who was just a fantastic artist and contributor to this program, and that Jerry Lynn brought her to us. One of my favorite things, if I may, Helen, about our art form, I say we all go to a very small high school. We don't always see each other between classes, and some years we don't even pass each other in the hall, or we didn't make it to prom. But when it comes to it, we're pretty tightly networked, and I'm actually, that's a great thing, but sometimes it's not. And what this project has done is it's opened up that network for us, for the Santa Fe Opera, and I think for the betterment of this art form. So that's where I'd like to leave things. Thank you.
That's wonderful. New relationships out of all this, and just expanding kind of our connection. That's great. So I can't wait to start this. And so our assistant manager, Alyssa, is probably queuing this up. I would just like all of the panelists to be going off the camera because, with the Zoom, there's always a lag of some sort, and we kind of all understand that. So we'll come back for questioning at the end, but we're going to just all go off and let's enjoy. It's about 37 minutes long.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Natasha Campbell, and I greet you on behalf of the Board of Trustees of Portside, New York. We are thankful for your presence here this evening and for your current and your future support of Portside. Portside is honored to host this stellar presentation about an amazing woman. Fannie Lou Hamer will forever be recognized for her work in the civil rights movement of the 1960s. I was especially excited about this event because the words of Fannie Lou Hamer still ring true today. People of color are still sick and tired of being sick and tired. Given the current climate that we're living through, it's necessary to remind us of the sacrifices that were made so that all of us could be here this afternoon together. Again, Portside thanks you for your presence, and we thank the Santa Fe Opera for making this afternoon possible. We hope that you will enjoy the show and that you leave here today inspired to be a part of the movement for equity for everyone. Thank you. Black lives matter. 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 Tanya, I don't know.
No justice?
No peace.
No justice!
No peace. What? You don't know? What?
What's his name?
George Floyd.
George Floyd.
Is this really
Brianna.
going to make a difference? What are you saying? I'm saying, I don't know. Look, get rid of slavery. They answer with Jim Crow. Try to move into a better neighborhood. Redlining. Bust your ass to vote. Gerrymandering. Oh, education. Starving kids can't learn. Then there's the prison pipeline, which strips you of all of it. And now, black and brown dying 3 times the rate of whites from a pandemic. Racist healthcare system. 400 years of trying to get this nation to care about us. They just find new ways to kill us. This is how we stop it.
Tell me what democracy looks like.
This is what democracy looks
Tell me what democracy looks like.
This is what democracy looks like. We turn the tables upside down.
Change begins in the streets, but to be effective, it must end.
At the ballot box. At the ballot box. But our votes didn't count. Electoral college, white lab. You know what ain't count? The 36% of black voters who stayed home. Could it be the election was decided by the people who didn't vote? It feels hopeless. I can see why people would. I know you didn't just fix your mouth. My generation is sick of begging them to see us. We're tired of failed attempts.
Sick and tired of being sick and tired. Sick and tired of being sick and tired.
They quoting Fannie Lou Hamer. Who? Fannie Lou Hamer. Before Breonna Taylor, before Sandra Bland, you gonna throw in the towel after a couple marches? She gave her whole life to this struggle.
Listen, we vote, we don't vote. They still kill us.
Black Lives Matter. Black Lives
You
Matter.
do know this is a nation of laws, don't you? Unless a thing is protected in the law, it's just a cute idea. Y'all think impatience is something new. 60 years ago, Fannie Lou Hamer felt the same way. Like she didn't matter and things were never gonna change, especially in Mississippi. She was born a sharecropper. Slavery by a different name. Hell, slavery was still on the books in Mississippi until the year 2013. Mississippi did everything it could to keep Black people from the power of the vote. Everything. Fannie Lou Hamer was Black Lives Matter. You need to know her story. How she first got involved in the Civil Rights Movement, 1962.
She limping?
Polio, or a broken leg that didn't get set right when she was a child.
No medical care.
Quit school to feed the family. Couldn't have children. They sterilized her without her consent.
Mississippi appendectomy.
Hello, are you Mrs. Hamer?
I am.
I'm from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee.
From the what?
From SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. You know, civil rights workers.
I've come to invite you to a meeting tonight at my church to learn how to register to vote.
They taught us that mess in school, and it's turned me off.
But Mrs. Hamer, don't you want Negroes to be treated as first-class citizens?
First-class citizens, civil rights. Miss, the only rights that white folks is gonna give us is the right to die, and they feel taking cotton.
All I ask, Mrs. Hamer, is that you come to the meeting. Reverend James Bell will be speaking tonight. He might change your mind. Luke chapter 12, verse 54 says, recognize the signs of the times. If you see clouds forming in the sky, you know. Matthew chapter 16, verse 3 says, and in the morning it will be foul weather today.
Foul weather.
For the sky is red lowering.
The sky is red.
Oh, ye hypocrites! Ye can discern the face of the sky, but can ye not discern the signs of the times?
The signs of the times. Rain is coming.
That's right, the rain is coming, and when the wind blows from the south,
It's gonna be hot.
that's right, you can interpret the weather by what you see and feel.
What you see and feel.
You know what the weather will be tomorrow by the sky and the air today. Then hypocrites, how can you see with your own eyes the Black men and women who have put their lives on the line for your rights and not know a storm is brewing?
Storm is brewing.
Hypocrites, how can you feel the dissatisfaction in your soul and don't know a heart with a stirring? Hypocrites, if you can see and feel these things, how can you not know the change is coming?
Change is coming. nation. Are you not the hot wind that will rise up against injustice and vanquish those who oppress you? We are the wind. You are the storm. We are the storm. You are the hot wind. We are the hot wind. Who will change Mississippi? We will change Mississippi. You are the change. We are the change. And how will you change Mississippi? With our vote. With your what? With our vote. How will you make life better in Mississippi? With our vote. With your what? With our vote. Who will be a rainmaker? Who will be a rainmaker? Who will go down to the courthouse and make it free? Who will go register to vote? Who will go register? I am the change. Send me. Send me. Send me. Fannie Lou Hamer had been leading the plantation workers and organizing the boss's books since she was a child. So it was natural that once she committed herself to civil rights, she was leading and organizing that. She took a busload to Indianola to register to vote. She had a way that made others feel brave.
Mrs. Hamer, are you sure about this? Maybe we ought to pray on it some more.
You can pray until you faint, but unless you get up and try to do something, God is not going to put it in your lap. Now let's go get registered. Amen, Mrs. Hamer. Let's go get registered. Word had got out that this busload of Negroes from Ruleville, Mississippi were trying to reddish. That's how they called it. At the county courthouse in Indianola, they were met by gun-toting white men looking for trouble, and some women. Nothing scarier than a bunch of God-fearing white ladies made them into the courthouse 2 by 2. What y'all want? We are here to register. Huh, that's so. Well, you know, you have to pass a literacy test first. This here section 16 of the Constitution of the State of Mississippi. Read it aloud. Ex post facto laws or laws impairing the obligation of contracts shall not be passed. Now, what does that mean? Ma'am, I know as much about ex post facto laws as a horse knows about Christmas Day. Then you fail the literacy test. Next. I said, get out of my courthouse, you filthy nigger, or I will have the police drag you out. 2 by 2, they all went through the same thing, and 2 by 2, they failed. When they got back on the bus to head back to Ruleville, they were surrounded by city police and state highway patrolmen.
There's more and more rednecks gathering out there. Oh, they all got guns and dogs. Oh, here comes the sheriff. They gonna put us all in jail. I want to go home to my family.
You, driver, get off the bus.
Oh, Lord, what they gonna do to us?
This little light of mine.
Her voice, it's like a cool
I'm
drink.
gonna let it shine.
And you can't kill the soul's thirst for freedom.
This little light of mine.
Somehow, Fannie Lou's voice threaded the heavens
I'm gonna let it
to
shine.
rain down the Holy of Holies.
This little light of mine.
Everybody on that bus and the
I'm gonna let
police
it shine.
was washed
Let
in
it
it.
shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, Lord, I'm gonna let it shine.
Let it shine.
Everywhere I go, Lord, I'm gonna let it shine.
Let it shine.
Everywhere I go, Lord, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Oh, shine, 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 shine. I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, shine, 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 shine. I'm gonna let it shine. Shine, 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 shine. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Oh, in the jailhouse, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, in the jailhouse, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, in the jailhouse, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Oh, this little light of mine, Lord, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, this little light of mine, Lord, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. This little light of mine, Lord, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine.
I hear beside you for driving a vehicle the wrong color. The fine is $100 to be paid now.
But sir, I don't have $100.
Then I'll have to place you under arrest.
If they arrest you, who will drive us back home? You go tell them you'll have to arrest us all.
To arrest us all. There ain't room in the jail for all 18 of you. How much you think you got?
Sir, I don't know.
$50. Go to that bus and you better bring me back $30.
Between all of us, we can for sure come up with $30. Here's 3.
I got $1.
I got 50 cents. Here's another quarter.
I got $5. What you doing with $5? Paying the police to keep us out of jail.
$30. That'll do it.
And I'd better not see you on that yellow bus again and in the Nolan.
They'll see us again, all right. We'll keep coming back until we get what we came for. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me wrong. Turn me wrong, won't let them turn me wrong. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me wrong. Keep keep on talking, marching up the freedom band. Ain't gonna let no citation turn me wrong, won't let it turn me wrong. Ain't gonna let no citation turn me wrong. Keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom band. Ain't gonna let no jailhouse turn me wrong, won't let it turn me wrong. Ain't gonna let no jailhouse turn me wrong. Keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom band. Ain't gonna let no county clock turn me wrong, turn me wrong. Ain't gonna let no county clock turn me wrong. Keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom band. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me wrong, let it turn me wrong. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me wrong. Keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom band. We're coming back all right. We don't scare that easy. I ain't scared. Oh no, highway patrolman. I ain't scared. Oh no, town police. I ain't scared. Oh no, county sheriff. Ain't scared. Oh no, county clerk. Ain't scared. On the literacy test. On the highway patrol. On the town police. On the county clerk. On the county sheriff. On the literacy test. I ain't scared. I know highway patrolman. I ain't scared. I know town police. I ain't scared. I know county sheriff. Ain't scared. I know county clerk.
After they paid the fine, they continued on to Rouville, where Fannie Lou had worked for 18 years. She was met there by her children, who told her that the plantation owner was angry because she had gone down to try to register. He said, if you don't go down and withdraw your registration, you will have to leave. Then, if you go down and withdraw, you still might have to go, because we are not ready for that here in Mississippi.
I didn't try to register for you. I tried to register for myself.
She had to leave that same night. A lot of the muscle of the civil rights movement came from the young people like June Johnson. Nobody at the workshop believed me when I told them I was only 15. When I started helping Negroes register to vote, Mama and Daddy said, girl, you're too young to be doing all this. They were scared. The Mississippi Delta is the most dangerous place in the world to be a Negro. But when they saw the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, we call it STEAM for short,
But when they saw what Snip was doing, they changed their tune. And Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer, that woman inspires us all. Her talking and singing about the struggles for our rights makes me want to stand up and sing too. And she ain't scared of nothing and nobody. Her bravery makes us brave. We've come from Charleston, South Carolina. I've never been so far away from home. And I've never seen Negroes so unafraid and ready. It's gonna happen. Black folks lining up to vote in Greenwood, in Louisville, all over Mississippi. And I can't wait until the day I can stand with them. And when I do, and when I vote, things will change. Things gonna change. Things gonna change. No scraps from white folks' tables. No sitting at the back of the bus. No more working for slave wages. And more schools that are just for us.
Mama and Daddy will eat at any restaurant they choose. Hospitals will treat us all like human beings.
White folks cry. I say, get ready. It's time for a better day. Things gonna change. 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 Things gonna change.
People know I'm stubborn.
Dude, you could argue with a stop sign.
I would if it said to stop fighting for my rights. Lines have to be turned, white and colored, to a new way of thinking.
I will stand with those who make it happen.
Fannie Lou kept on feeling around for a soft place in the hard heart of Mississippi. In 1964, she led a group of blacks and whites to challenge the lily white delegation that was always sent to the Democratic National Convention. They had to live on bologna sandwiches they brought from home, but they sang and preached and marched and protested round the clock, day and night, on the Atlantic City Boardwalk, right outside the convention. Finally, the Credentials Committee had to let him speak. And Fannie Lou's testimony? Imagine, this poor black sharecropper made it all the way from the lowest place in the United States into every living room that had a TV. What she said rocked the nation.
Mr. Chairman, and to the Credentials Committee, my name is Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer, and I live at 626 East Lafayette Street, Ruleville, Mississippi, Sunflower County. June the 9th, 1963, I had attended a voter registration workshop, was returning back to Mississippi. 10 of us was traveling by the Continental Trailway bus. When we got to Winona, Mississippi, 4 of the people got off to use the washroom. During this time, I was on the bus. But when I looked through the window and saw they had rushed out, one of the ladies said it was a state highway patrolman and the chief of police ordered us out. I stepped off of the bus to see what was happening, and somebody screamed from the car, "Get that one there!" When I went to get in the car, when the man told me I was under arrest, he kicked me. I was carried to the county jail and was placed in the cell. And it wasn't too long before 3 white men came to my cell. One of these men was a state highway patrolman, and he said, "We are going to make you wish you was dead." All of this on account of we want to register to become first-class citizens. And if the Freedom Democratic Party is not seated now, I question America. Is this America, the land of the free and the home of the brave, where we have to sleep with our telephones over the hooks because our lives be threatened daily, because we want to live as decent human beings in America? Thank you.
They beat her so bad that she never fully recovered from it. But you know how they say, God doesn't call the qualified.
He qualifies the call. That beating was for legit bona fides, her credentials.
The Credentials Committee had no choice but to open their eyes to what was happening in Mississippi.
Who will protect our rights? Then our protests are just
Spitting in the wind.
yeah. Change begins in the streets.
But to make a real difference, it must end
At the ballot box. I get it.
At the ballot box. Woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. Oh, woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Walking and talking with my mind set on freedom. Walking and talking with my mind set on freedom. Walking and talking with my mind set on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Let's walk. We believe that we will be seated at this convention because it is right. Because we are here to claim rights for all Mississippians. And I'm not just talking about segregation and voting rights. I'm talking about changing people's lives for our children and for our children's children. Because it ain't no harm to keep your mind set on freedom. Oh, ain't no harm to keep your mind set on freedom. Ain't no harm to keep your mind set on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. The Freedom Democratic Party is the true delegation because it shows that Black folks and white folks in our state want change. But I tell you, what's wrong in Mississippi isn't just a problem, it's America's problem. You see, when you tell the truth, you don't have anything to hide. They fired me from my job for just trying to vote. They threatened me for speaking out, but I'm not scared. What's the point of being scared? The only thing they can do is tell me, and the thing they've been trying to tell me for my life.
Bravo. Bravo.
Ooh, you got a special thanks here.
Yes.
You got a special thanks.
That was incredibly powerful. We are so lucky here to be able to share this as a community and watch it together. I know it was premiered for the first time just last week, like exactly a week ago, I believe. So the Wharton community, we feel very, very lucky. And I know that the generosity of all of the artists involved have allowed for this to be freely shared, and that we can perhaps share this out as widely as possible. I think that's really the power of kind of the social media and being able to share it as far and as near as we can. So I encourage all of our young people to do that. And this will be on our YouTube Live. So feel free to share the link with your friends and everyone. Wow. This would be the time where, you can easily, either chat privately or, put it in the Q&A if there are any questions. I know we don't have a lot of time left over, but I know that I got a few beforehand, and I'm just going to go right to it. There were some compositional questions, actually, Chandler. Just wanted to know what the full score is, the instrumentation of the orchestra, the accompaniment is, because it's just with piano in this as a workshop. And that, another thing is that, when is going to be the fully staged performance? Those were the two questions I got.
Well, the first one I can answer that. That's it's scored for single string, 5 single strings, a string quartet, 2 violins, viola, cello, and a double bass, and a piano, a steel string guitar, and a drum set. 8. So I was given the number of 8, and that was the 8 I picked. So.
I see. So there was some sort of a stipulation guideline as to the size of the instrumentation and all that.
Keep it chamber size so it's portable and fits in a more intimate theatrical setting. And then when will it be done? Well, that's a good question. I think it's penciled in sometime in 2022. Where? That's a mystery, keeping causes. So, but it's going to be workshopped. It's scheduled to be workshopped in a similar format with piano and stage, not staged, but with the singers at Louisville and at Opera Louisville in June.
Okay.
Kentucky Opera.
That will be
Kentucky Opera.
Let me get to Kentucky Opera in June. So that would be the full hour and 15 minutes.
That's great. Another question was, how did you find these singers? Where did you find these singers? And, how do you cast for something like this? So, and who does that?
Well, usually it's the director, producers, the administrative staff of the opera house or the company. In this case, I looked in my Rolodex, if that'll show you how old I am, going back to reference Rolodex. Brianna Hunter came to us through Andrea, through her connection with Santa Fe Opera, and she'll be doing other things at Santa Fe. Nicole Mitchell is a personal friend. Heather Hill is a personal friend, both professional singers. All of the singers are professional singers. And then I just reached out. Primarily, casting is very important. And for something like this, and for the conditions under which we had to produce it, we had to have singers who were consummate professionals, but also understood that the heart was in the right place, understanding what all the limitations and challenges would be. So I am very indebted to all of the singers for their willingness to come play with us.
I see. Yeah, that's really a wonderful. It's so powerful, and it's right now. It was just, you know, it's kind of hard for me to just talk about these technical things. However, our young people are really curious about how much of the words, libretto, was original words by Fannie Lou Hamer, or any other source that you were able to research, and how much of it is your own?
Quite a bit of it is my own. I would say probably 85 to 90% of it is my own. But there is so much available about Fannie Lou Hamer. So I felt very lucky that I could go to many, many sources. So what we wanted to do, what I tried to do, was to give the story a romantic sweep, if you want to use that word, but rooted in, for certain, in the actual events, and rooted with actual language that Fannie used or people used about her. But most of it is my imagination.
Mm. Wow. It is, it is time, but I think it is really important for us to quickly go around, all five of you, to just maybe part us with, with a sentiment or a message to our young people. We are just few days, less than a week away from this year's election. And some of our youth orchestra members are turning 18, and this might be their very first time voting. And I think this is a really important time for our young people to realize what a privilege this is. And someone like Fannie Lou Hamer had to risk her life and fight for the right to vote. And I think, art expressing life, and life, expressing art, that connection is so strong and so well lived out in here in this opera. So I'm just gonna, maybe we can, start with, Andrea, Beth, Jerry, Chandler, and Diana, kind of go in that order. Just a few parting words for all of us.
Thank you for that opportunity. And again, Helen, thank you for inviting us to spend this time with you and the students at Wharton. I think Chan and Diana gave me they gave it to me because it's June Johnson, and in speaking to your students, the character's 15 years old, and she's out there, and she's making a difference. And I've seen thousands of young people in the Black Lives Matter protests as voting rights activists, and it's never too early, or in the case of many people, it's never too late to speak up and show up. So thank you.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, democracy is a participatory process. Get involved, get your voice out there, and you have the right to choose, and don't squander it.
I would say, to tie in the message of music and politics, that democracy is an ever evolving composition that relies on all of us to perform it, to bring it to life.
And I would like to say that the compelling story that Is This America Told, what you just saw, is just a part of what Fannie Lou Hamer had to endure, and the larger opera goes into some of the deeper, darker moments and experiences that she had to experience. These women literally put their lives on the line. They could very easily have been killed, and so many hundreds, if not thousands, were. So people have given their lives for the right to vote. Don't ever forget that.
And I would say freedom isn't free. Democracy is not a state, it is an act. And if you don't act wholeheartedly to preserve it, you lose the right to live in a democracy. So vote.
Thank you so much for this meaningful time to engage with our young people. And we are just so indebted to your dedication and your passion to, yes, the art, but it comes from your life. It's not just for the art for art's sake, but to authentically connect. And I think these Friday webinars have been really missioned around that connection. And so thank you so much for bringing this at this time. Yes, you know, as a curator, I begged for this time, you know, for you to all be here because of our election. And anytime, if we can live out the moment through a form of art, what more could we ask? So thank you so much for every one of you, and good luck with this production. And we can't wait until we can see it on a full stage. And if it comes this way in the East Coast, we'll make sure that we rally up and go and see it. So thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. And next week, same time, same place. Thank you.